Hey, welcome to the Robert Good Show, where we talk about deep shit and wear cool hats. Today I want to talk about something pretty interesting. It has been called the biggest philosophical question of all. And the question is, why is there something rather than nothing? Kind of a crazy concept, right? Why does anything exist at all? If you turn back in your mind your kind of maybe just general self-awareness of the world as you experience it, play a movie backwards, essentially, of a history to this point. What happens? Where does it end? Or where does it start? Where does the movie end? Where does the process start? Go back, we can reel back, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. At some point, you will be born, and then go back, your parents, your grandparents, your great-great-grandparents were going down 2 centuries, 3 centuries, 4 centuries, 5 centuries, 1,000 years, 2 millennia. Now we're in year zero. Now we're going back in negative time. Well, of course, it's not negative time, but just how we count time. 3,000 BC, 10,000 BC. Boy, now we almost know nothing, right? There's hardly anything to even imagine. What happened 10,000 BC? I have no idea. Some about ziggurats, maybe. Keep going back. Now we're in, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 100,000 BC. I'm pretty sure humans are out and about doing their things in villages. They're hunter-gatherers. We go back 200,000, 400,000, 500,000, a million years. Well, there's creatures around, but I don't think there's any humans yet. I'm a little hazy on that piece. But the point is, the farther we go back, the less we know, the less we're connected to it, the less we understand. Now it starts to get really, really hazy. Go back 2, 3, 4 million years, 5, 6, 7 million years. Now there's no life on Earth. Go back a billion, or maybe there is, I think there is, we're talking billions of years for evolution. Is that right? Again, I'm a bit hazy on that exactly. Maybe you are too. Keep going back, billions and billions, until the solar system doesn't even exist. The sun doesn't exist. The universe is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Go back 13.7 billion years. I do have that number down. And we get to the Big Bang, right? The thing that started it all. Now, can you keep going? Can the movie keep going back, or is that the end of the movie? Did it just all spring out of nothing? Or can we go back? Is this just an event of many other events, and you just keep going back? Okay, kind of everything stops. You kind of maybe there's a point of light, but you can in the movie slip into that point of light and find that there's something else happening before that accounts for what happened in the Big Bang. We don't know. It seems odd. Are we saying that the universe just sprang out of nowhere in the Big Bang? I don't know, self-creation, it made itself, or it just sprang out of nothingness? It's a kind of a crazy question. You'd think that we would know the answer to this, or have some idea, but it's actually a pretty profound mystery. We don't know how it is that something could have become out of nothing, how anything should be here. Now, since I do talk about theology and about God and those kinds of issues, I have to, of course, mention that this is kind of the setup for one of the most famous arguments about the existence of God. And the argument goes like this. Either everything that exists came from nothing, or there is a being or an entity or a something. It doesn't have to be a being, or just there's something that has always existed. Okay. And of course, that's a bit of a setup for saying, aha, that something must be God. right? Now, does that really work? It feels somewhat satisfying because I suppose on the face of it, it's less ridiculous than saying that something came from nothing, right? To say that, it's not that something came from nothing, it's that there was always something. Like there's something that has always existed, and that's what accounts for the somethingness of the universe. But I gotta say, like, okay, first of all, just a little parenthetical statement here. Even if that is like a valid proof for the existence of God, which I think is a bit of a reach, because like just because we're saying something existed that created, or out of which our current existence somehow was formed, that's really not the same thing as saying that, the God that people 3,000 years ago in the Middle East started worshiping is that deity, right? Like we're talking about an event that hypothetically happened 13.7 billion years ago. So I think let's, maybe a little bit of humility connecting the dots between that and something that ancient people here on Earth claimed about 3,000 years ago. I mean, that just seems kind of wacky to me. And I know that there are attempts to connect those dots, but I'm not going to go into that right now. And honestly, I couldn't follow each one of them, even if I wanted to. But I just wanted to do that as a little parenthetical. Don't get too excited about this to say like, oh, see, it's true that Jesus died for my sins or something like that. But let's also consider this idea of the thing that must have existed forever. Is that really any better of an idea than something being formed out of nothing? Like something coming out of nothing just seems on its face untenable, right? Ridiculous, illogical. But is the fact of something existing always existing, is that any more coherent? Aren't we just putting a label on something? And what is it that we are imagining when we say that? How can it be that something would always exist? And does that thing that always exist in a timeless state, or does it also experience time? And if it experienced time, then are we saying that time has always existed? But can it be possible that time has always existed? That seems difficult. That means that time is going back forever and ever and ever and ever. Or are we going to say that that thing that existed exists in a changeless state? And so therefore it doesn't experience time. But then if it exists in a changeless state, how could it be the source of the universe? Because if that entity, that thing, that something is the source of the universe, then it would actually have experienced change, because there would be a moment in its existence before it created the universe, and then there would be a moment in its existence after which it created the universe. And that would suggest that it does have change. In other words, how can something that doesn't change produce something else? That seems irrational, hard to understand anyway. And so it seems to me that what we really have is two possibilities. Or these are the possibilities that present themselves to our human minds, right? That we have two possibilities, neither of which makes any sense, right? And to me, that seems like the most honest, and I don't want to say it's dishonest to argue otherwise, but that just seems like the most honest assessment of it, is that it still doesn't make any sense. Even if we consider these two options, neither of them actually makes any sense. And so this actually makes me think about logic and reason and metaphysics. So what is metaphysics? So metaphysics is when you talk about the basic principles of existence, but detached from any considerations of the physical world, right? So you're looking for the root principles of existence. And the way that you access metaphysics, the only way you can access metaphysics, is through reasoning, right? So it's reason uncoupled from anything to do with the universe itself, and seeking principles that are prior to the universe, and principles by which the universe would also, in an indirect way, be governed too. And so, of course, metaphysics gets us into the realm of God, the existence of God, and the existence of non-physical entities and minds, if such thing can even exist. And for myself, I've always been a little bit skeptical, or I don't know if skeptical is the right word, but perhaps the best word is confused by the way in which metaphysics, the people so easily talk as though we can actually have some kind of sense that there is a correspondence between our reasoning and metaphysical realities, if there is such a thing as metaphysical realities. So I always think, like, okay, so the fact that we're reasoning about things which can only be accessed through reasoning and have no conceivable way of being verified, does that in itself demonstrate that we're actually touching reality? Does it? It doesn't seem like we have any way to know. It seems like it's all just a mind game. And I guess it comes down to one's confidence in what reason alone can do. Another thing that bothers me a bit about the whole metaphysical approach is that I think that reason is actually something that is evolved. In other words, our mind, or at least our use of reason, or let me put it this way, reason is what human minds do in response to the physical world. And the reason that we actually use reason and rely on it is because we evolved to successfully inhabit the physical world, right? So reason is like an abstraction of the principles of the physical world. And so that would suggest that we ought to be careful when we take reason out of the context of the physical world, because if it's an abstraction of the principles of the physical world, then that suggests it's not necessarily a sure guide to things that are prior to, outside of the physical world. So what I'm saying is that it may be not possible for us to reason about things outside the universe because we were evolved to live within the universe. And so we can only reason based on the principles of the universe. But probably the universe came from something that was other than the universe, right? So how can we access that information about things that are other than the universe? It seems that we might be stuck here and not be able to imagine beyond it. Or maybe there is a way, but maybe it requires some more consideration or some more study or something. It may be that someday, for example, we'll be able to see beyond the Big Bang and sort of garner some kind of principles, some kind of understanding of the causes that led to the Big Bang. And in that case, it might be that we would have some basis, on which to extrapolate further beyond the principles that govern our own universe. But at this point, I'm a little skeptical as to whether we really could. And the interesting implication here is that this kind of undercuts a lot of the reasoning and a lot of the claims that come with religion. because religion, particularly Christian religion, is actually quite famous for its metaphysical disputations. Like, if we're talking about, for example, the nature of God, right? Like the Trinity, and can God be three in one? And you might say, but Rob, you see, the reason that the Trinity doesn't make sense to us is exactly what you're talking about. It's because it's a metaphysical, and it's like our reasoning is too small to encompass it. And I suppose that would be a valid point, but the problem is that it's impossible to distinguish that from like something that's just made up and doesn't make any sense. So, I think that we probably should be a little bit careful with the kind of things that we attribute to, original causes and things that go like beyond just the most basic way of understanding knowledge, which is by like testing it and verifying it and repeating it and all those simple things that we do every day as human beings, and that science has actually codified and made it a little bit more sophisticated. But science is essentially just the art of observing the world and drawing conclusions from it, and that I argue that is what we humans just do every day, all the time. It's what the human brain does. But we are subject also to these flights of fancy, where we use reason to extrapolate up into like the bigger issues of the universe and life and all those sorts of things. And it's just every time I'm confronted with these big questions, I kind of scratch my head and I go, that sounds like a good argument, but I'm still not convinced. It just seems like a bit too much of a reach, and I wish that we could have a little bit more basis on which to determine that that's something that we only arrived at through reason and not through evidence about the world. That we have some better reason, some better basis, I should say, on which to determine that it's accurate or not. Well, okay, so those are all like deep thoughts, and I'm not really actually trying to draw any conclusions. I'm just more kind of just expressing skepticism. So if you enjoyed that, then let me know. And if you have the answer to life, the universe, and everything, just go ahead and write it down. Please don't write 42 because it's an old joke. Okay, thanks for listening. Hit the like button. Come back next time.